Preacher goes long.
If you get Marcus second, third cup,
Get Rhonda to sit down. Rhonda to sit down.
she shows you.
Oh, you said Margaret. Is that Margaret? Brad said you were holding up things. I didn't agree with it though.
Sorry.
Okay, so good to see you today. Let me, are you gonna fall out in the chair or something?
Well, let me just tell you what happened. I wasn't doing something right, and Jennifer knocked me over. I just need to get on to her. Hey, now you know what I live with.
And Jennifer's side of the story is.
Actually, I was leaning back too much in my chair and the leg broke.
Oh, no.
And I got wedged between the chair and
Couldn't get up.
So here excuse me, so there I was telling a story about Iraq. And it's like PTSD. It's like, that's great. All comes back. I'll tell you, I got a little lost there. Anyway, so as long as Wayne doesn't make a spectacle of himself during our class today, one quick reminder, we still have the envelopes, the Power of 100 in the back. If you'd like to participate in that for our mission trip to the City of Children in Mexico, just take one. If it's got a number on there, whatever the number is how much money you put into the envelope, which I guess that can be a check as well, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Or double.
Or more. But if you go less, we're going to talk bad about you from the pulpit. Just kidding. So, we are here persevering through a pandemic. And, while many people still see this as, well, there's different perspectives on it right now. Am I on?
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Different perspectives on it. A lot of people are like, okay, we're past it, we're done, nothing else. Let's just press on. While others are still very much frightened to get out of their homes. And I say frightened, maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe more cautious right now. And some of those we can see with, people who have certain medical conditions and all like that. So I'm not going to beat up on anyone if they will stay home or come out, or whatever their perspectives are on COVID. That's not what this is about today. But in this Bible study series, we're addressing the present coronavirus from the standpoint of faith. We've looked at Jesus' example of self-denial, his love, his humility. And in this lesson, we want to examine Jesus' unique perspective on struggle and difficulty, how he looked at things. It is our perspective on hardship and adversity that determines our attitude and our response. Did y'all get a handout? I see they're not here, so either they got thrown away or okay. Good. So, whatever our attitude, whatever our response is, a variety of responses are available to us as we go through it. Now, I mentioned some of them, but there's responsive denial, no problem, everything's fine. One of resentment. This, where somebody says, this isn't right, somebody's to blame for this. We want to find a person or persons or whatever to blame. Cynicism, get used to it. It's going to be like this for a while. Just get used to it. Despair, this is where somebody says, this is terrible, so many things are going wrong. And a lot of times we go back and forth between all of those responses, all depending upon our perspective. Jesus' perspective on trouble and adversity is different from ours. We can definitely learn from him to understand his point of view. What we're going to do today is look at a notable event from his life, and that is the miracle of the raising of Lazarus. So, Raisin of Lazarus, brief chronology of it. John introduces the account with a reference to Jesus' special relationship with this family. He says, it starts off there in John 11, 1 through 3. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Look, Lord, the one you love is sick." So Mary and Martha informed Jesus that their brother Lazarus is ill, right? We know this story. Jesus apparently enjoyed a close friendship with his family, and when he became ill, the sisters, rightfully so, want to let him know, hey, he's sick. You need to know about this, right? And so they sent a message to Jesus not only to inform him, but to express their faith that he could act and do something. Maybe they were thinking, you know what? If Jesus heals total strangers, then perhaps maybe he'll come heal his friend, right? Wouldn't you think that? That's what they were thinking. So it's interesting, Jesus avoids going to him right away. John 11, 4 through 6. When he heard this, Jesus said, the sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed there where he was for 2 more days. He said to the disciples, hey, let's go back to Judea. It's obviously there stated in the text that Jesus loved the family. Why in the world would he not act quickly to intervene and heal the brother? Jesus himself offers some insight into that question. He said, the sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, understand, during this time, oftentimes Jesus said things that people around him, they did not understand what world he was talking about. This is one of those times, I think. He believes Lazarus' illness will result in glory for God. He knows the purpose behind his delay. The sisters know nothing. They simply watch their brother grow weaker and weaker, perhaps expecting Jesus' imminent arrival, like the good guy in a movie that shows up just in time to save the day. That's maybe what they were looking at. Maybe, like some of us, they firmly place their confidence in Jesus, hoping the healing will come. Well, we know the healing does not come. So Jesus speaks to his disciples in verses 11 through 14. He went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, and I'm going there to wake him up. I'm sorry, but just thinking of this, and back in that time, the way Jesus talking to his disciples. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. And Jesus has been speaking of his death. His disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Lazarus is dead, man. Do you guys not get this? He is dead. Deader than a doorknob. He is dead. I mean, he is D-E-A-D dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so you may believe. But let us go to it. I don't know. I'm throwing some theatrics in there. I don't know how the conversation went, but Jesus knows he's died. Disciples not truly understanding what's going on. So Jesus' delay ultimately results in Lazarus' death. Jesus supernaturally senses Lazarus has died, and then he proceeds to Bethany. And in this context here, we have Jesus' puzzling words. Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so you may believe. Again, Jesus' comments help us understand the reason behind his gladness. I'm glad I went there, so that you may believe. He wanted them to have the opportunity to increase their faith. So when Jesus does arrive in Bethany, he's greeted by Martha, verses 20 and 22. When Martha heard Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, you ever come home from work, guys, and wife says, if you would have been here, I have not. If you would have been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Good. Maybe I'll throw a wrench in here for you. Maybe you might look at something a little different today on this part here. Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. Martha there, confessing her faith in Jesus. Because Jesus had healed others, as I said earlier, she was convinced if he had arrived in time, her brother Lazarus would have been healed. Some people, some scholars, consider Martha's words a statement of rebuke, as if Jesus is to blame. You did this, Jesus. You did it because you could have prevented it. Okay? You know, some people rebuke Jesus nowadays. But Jesus could have prevented stuff. So, more likely, her words are simply an expression of profound sadness and regret that he wasn't there. Martha adds a further expression of faith. Verse 22, I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Okay, that verse there, that's an interesting verse there. A little puzzling. That's why I hate using film mix. I always hit it. I'm trying to beat my chest. Little puzzling statement there. So, let me ask you this question. We read that verse again. I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Let me ask you this question. Is Martha here acknowledging the belief that Jesus is able to raise her brother back to life? I don't know. I think that's kind of doubtful. Because when Jesus did command the stone be taken away, when he said, get rid of that stone, who objected? Martha objected. Why would she have objected?
Just because she knew he could raise him doesn't mean that she knew he would.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure Jesus has seen other deaths.
I mean, it's kind of like our lives today. Just because Jesus or God can doesn't mean they will. I mean, that doesn't stop us, though, from being prayerful for things. I mean, if I get sick, I want you guys to pray for me, okay? Oh, Jesus will do it if he feels like it. No, pray, man. Right? Pray for one another. I think more likely her words are simply confirmation that her faith in Jesus has not diminished. Saying, I still believe God works through you. So then, Martha will next speak to Mary there, verses 20 and 32 through 32. After she said this, she went back, called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said. He's asking for you. Mary heard this. She got up quickly and went to him. But Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up, went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, I don't know if Jesus ever felt guilty. Probably not. Here's these two sisters that he loves. Lazarus is dead. We tell him, Lord, if you'd been here. So most of the people who have come to comfort Mary and Martha do not yet know Jesus has arrived. And so when Mary leaves, they assume she's going to the tomb to mourn. Upon encountering Jesus, Mary offers the same response as her sister. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Both of them tell him. Lord, if you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. Both of these sisters had absolutely amazing faith. They had a lot of faith. Though Jesus is delayed and Lazarus dies, their confidence in Jesus is not diminished. Their devotion to him is not dependent or based upon his relief of their suffering. Listen to that again, okay? And every time you read this story of Lazarus, again, remember this. Their devotion to him, because they still love Jesus, their devotion to him is not dependent or based upon his relief of their suffering. They love him anyway. Could he have healed Lazarus? Yes, he could. Long distance? Yes, he could. They know that. They still love him. They still believe in him, no matter what. And I say that because of the times that I've seen people get upset at God because God didn't do what they wanted God to do. Intervene when they wanted it to save a life. Their devotion to him would be dependent upon the relief of that person's suffering. So, the story continues, and we observe the death of Jesus' compassion in verses 33 through 36. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews that come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. And the Jews said, see how he loved him. Some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? I think Jesus' tears here are very much a proof of his humanity. They were also proof of his love and his concern for Lazarus, and Mary, and Martha. Whether he wept because of his compassion for the sisters or out of his own grief, really is immaterial, his tears were real expressions of a compassionate and a sensitive heart. In every way, you see, in every way, Jesus was like us. When he feels sadness, he weeps. So it's true, Jesus had allowed Lazarus to suffer and die for the sake of a higher purpose. But Jesus is not immune to grief and sorrow, whether it's his own or that of others. Though Jesus' own choice ultimately led to the present grief of Mary and Martha, he was not emotionally isolated from their pain. He still shared their pain. He still felt their pain. The question asked by some in the crowd makes sense to us. Why didn't the miracle worker intervene to keep his friend from dying? Well, yeah. Why not? Maybe we understand it because we've asked similar questions ourselves, and we probably have. So Jesus continues to act and to speak. Verses 38 through 40, Jesus once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God? So he instructed the stone to be removed from the entrance of the tomb. Martha is reluctant. Lazarus been dead 4 days. He'll be stinking. Martha's perspective, the only thing that will come from removing a stone is more distress and unpleasantness. I mean, think about that. They'll move the stone. She's there. It's going to stink. 4 days, he's not going to look good. Jesus' reply offers a further challenge. There in verse 40, did I not tell you, if you believe, you see the glory of God. And so in all of her pain and distress, Jesus continues to call for faith. Jesus does not permit sadness and suffering to detract from faith. On the contrary, he summons larger faith even in the midst of difficult times. Though confused and baffled, Martha continues to believe that the stone is removed. Verses 41 through 45. So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here. They may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Man, don't you know that was powerful there? Lazarus, come out. It's interesting to me that the Bible records this. The dead man came out. Now think about that. Let me say that again. The dead man came out. Dead man came out. I don't. Is it like that? I didn't check in every version, but it says the dead man came out. So I think it's just recorded that way, that in their sense and their logic, what they're looking at, he was dead, he came out. The dead man came out. His hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen, cloth around his face. Jesus said to him, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Therefore, many of the Jews who come to visit Mary and see what Jesus did believed in him. Okay, so, trivia question here. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, right? Is it ever recorded in our Bibles where Lazarus died?
You can only die once according to Hebrews 9:27.
So, since he can only die once, and he did it, Rick Lazarus still walking around somewhere?
No.
Okay.
You're too old.
The prophetess Deborah has answered that. No! Somewhere in Israel. Yeah, got you thinking, ain't it? In the blue zone.
Blue zone, yeah.
That's for all the old people.
2,000 years old.
There's not the recording of most of the deaths of the apostles either. And we don't believe they're walking around.
No,
Just
but they
because
weren't raised from the dead like Lazarus was.
Just because they were.
Jesus said, Lazarus, come out, man.
Jairus' daughter, we don't believe is alive.
We don't.
No.
You don't. So you got Lazarus and Jairus.
After 2,000 years.
I'm sorry, Lazarus is still alive, and he is with Jesus.
Yes,
in
but
heaven.
not on this earth.
I don't know
that.
I don't know.
They
I'm
use
not sure
Neutrogena.
what time and space it looks like on the other side.
Okay, so let's get away from this. We're Deborah and David over here.
She's looking it up now.
Okay, so
Now you see how I feel.
when I was a young preacher boy, one of the scariest things in my entire life was the first time I was asked to teach the adult class, because it's like ravenous wolves. And now I don't even care. What happened? Believe what you want.
Wayne, say something, rest of you, please.
Look out, he's leaning back.
lean back.
Lord have mercy on us, Wayne. Sit in the chair correctly. Yeah, it can still collapse, make a spectacle. Okay, so let's get back to Lazarus being still alive. No, I'm just kidding. You know, funny thing where that comes from, one of the greatest things about being in seminary is how we would study the Bible. And we would go through it, and some of the greatest conversations were break time with all of us preacher boys, and we would be studying this and reading this and going through it, and we would start thinking of things like this, like, well, Jesus raised him from the dead, never records his death. We would assume, yeah, and he probably is dead, but when we all get to heaven, Lazarus said, oh man, I've lived 8,000 years. I was waiting to go to heaven, but I'm still alive because Jesus raised him from the dead. I'm going to look at that and go, I told you.
Good luck with that.
After Jesus was resurrected, he didn't die.
That was Jesus.
Yes, sir.
I always find this story backwards, because we see the grief of the sisters and the faith that can be raised and all that, but nobody asks Lazarus what he thinks. Here he is, he's gone, and he's reaped his reward. And then they go, oh, wait a minute, come on back. I mean, if you're Lazarus, you're not excited about it.
No.
I agree.
As a Christian, I would hope that nobody would want to call me that. You know, let's do it again.
Well, he got two sisters. He never got a word in edgewise.
Nobody cares.
That is true. A lot of people that have been brought back with resuscitation. Why did you do it?
Yeah. That's to me the irony of the story of Lazarus is that we don't see the Lazarus side.
That would be amazing. We go to Israel, find him, walk around somewhere, and talk to him about it.
Was you resurrected or was you resurrected?
Resurrected or what?
Resurrected.
Resurrected?
Resurrected means you're brought back from the dead for immortality. Resurrected means you're just brought back to life. So does it say that he's resurrected or resurrected?
That's probably
None of the others.
speaks this language.
It says it was the dead man came out. Doesn't say it was alive.
He's definitely dead.
American Standard and King James say, he that was dead came forth.
He that was,
So
I think that's a
he
better
wasn't
rendering of what I have in the NIV.
It also translates the same way in Luke. He said the dead man sat up. So,
NIV?
yeah,
Yeah.
same way. You're right.
So anyway,
It could be the reason why he did and why he resurrected or resurrected or whatever the term would be, is there's so many people that doesn't believe in an afterlife. This would be a good indication that there is an afterlife that will help teach someone else about that there is an afterlife, because some folks just believe, once I'm dead, that's the end of it. We know that's not the end of it. So that could be a story for them to help them see that there is an afterlife. They should believe in Jesus and the resurrection.
Was Mary and Martha the same people who went to the tomb after Jesus died? Are these the same two, Mary and Martha?
looks like it. Okay, so here we see Jesus' clear purpose in all of these choices and occurrences. He's guiding events to the time and place so that others will believe. So, at Jesus' command, Lazarus returns from death, verses 43 to 44. This great miracle led many to put their faith in Christ. In verse 45, it says, therefore many Jews had come to visit Mary, and seeing what Jesus did, put their faith in him. And in fact, the effect of this raising was so profound and far-reaching that we read that the chief priests made plans not only to kill Jesus, but Lazarus as well. So, let's look then at the perspective of Jesus. The story of the raising of Lazarus reveals the perspective of Jesus on the particular subject of human pain and suffering. From the human perspective, adversity and hardship are the worst things that could possibly happen. It should be averted at all costs. Yet, Jesus had a different take on hardship and difficulty. To Jesus, some things are so important to God that they are worth interrupting the happiness and well-being of his children in order to accomplish them. The death of Lazarus brought sorrow and heartaches to the sisters, brought illness and pain to Lazarus himself. But out of those circumstances of sorrow and pain, God not only increased the faith of all the participants, but also planted the seed of belief in the lives of many other people. Jesus guided and worked through all the events of this inspiring story to accomplish two important purposes. His purpose was not to cause Lazarus to die, nor was it to bring sorrow and pain to Mary and Martha. The purposes of Jesus in these events are clearly defined in John chapter 11. He wished to bring glory to God. Verse 4 there, that sickness will not end in death, those for God's glory. He desired to inspire others to believe in him. Both purposes are expressed in Jesus' words to Martha. He said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So in the realm of Jesus, there's always been a close connection between faith and glory. We see it in Jesus' own transparent words of persistent commitment. In John 12, 27 through 28. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Lord, he says here, Father, glorify your name. And in his death, Jesus accomplished both good and glory, and both remain an inseparable part of the enduring purpose of God. Through all the pain and difficulty of the COVID-19 pandemic, two things are always true. God is sensitive to what we're feeling. Hebrews 4:15, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. When suffering and hardship enter the lives of God's people, he's never indifferent to the pain it causes. He remains a God of compassion who's touched by human suffering. God can use our own pain and difficulty for greater purposes, whether it be illness or death or unemployment, family trauma, whatever, unexpected worldwide pandemic. God can use any of them to bring about a greater good. The accomplishment of this good may not clearly be visible in the present, but its reality is certain. Just one of Gary's ideas and thoughts and beliefs is that, the pandemic might shake up church a little bit, and maybe in some good ways.
Actually, closed churches. The question is, did they all open back up?
I think it's going to have some good things to come. Maybe some were already closed before they ever closed the doors. So, how can God possibly be glorified in a pandemic that is so far-reaching and personally disruptive? Well, he is glorified. Our eyes may have been closed. We just haven't seen it. God is glorified in the faithfulness of his people when their abiding trust in him continues. He's glorified in the calm character of his followers, for their peaceful demeanor points to a transcendent reality. He's glorified expressions of love when his servants give themselves for others. In that process, the example of Jesus is continually displayed. God is glorified when we serve and love and persevere. This means that God's glory, to a significant extent, is dependent upon us. God is glorified simply because of who he is, but that glory is more clearly observed by others when his people demonstrate faith and hope and love. So we got to demonstrate it. People need to see that from us. Those demonstrations can be incredibly powerful when they're displayed in uncertain times like these. So, in next week's lesson, we're going to look at the example of the early church. We're going to try to discern further messages from Scripture in the midst of this pandemic. But just some questions here for you.
Actually, can I read just a few sentences here that I read in my I read this morning, and it's from, in fact, some of y'all may remember the couple from Arkansas that visited with us here a few months ago. This came from Debbie. In response to, does God always heal? Yes and no answers. And someone responded, wait, what? God doesn't always heal? I disagree. Prayers for healing are the safest prayers we can pray because God always says yes. Now let's define yes. If he heals you here, your healing is temporary. It's still good and amazing, but it will not last forever. You will get sick again. You will die. I've never met a 2,000-year-old Christian. But if he releases you from your mortal body and heals you in that way, then you are healed forever. No more sickness, no more pain, no more tears. The problem isn't sometimes God heals and sometimes he doesn't. The problem is we've begun to cherish temporary healing over eternal healing, so much so we now dismiss eternal healing as any type of healing at all. I read that this morning and I thought it was class.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. It's kind of heavy.
One day we all get to heaven and we'll see Lazarus and Jairus' daughters. And Gary, you're the only one who believed in us. Yeah, teach all you guys. Questions for you to ponder. What I'd like to answer right now since we're closing. What is it about Jesus' response that puzzles you? And there's a lot that puzzles me, actually. Interesting puzzle. When have you had to wrestle with God's delayed actions in response to your requests? How do you account for Mary and Martha's expressions of faith when Jesus does arrive? And how have you seen God glorified in this pandemic? So just some things to think about with that. Any questions? I have a question. Anybody have a boat mechanic that comes to Triumph's not hard to ride, so. He's in Houston, though.
He's in South Texas, so the Houston part.
It's just such a big help.
This surprises me.
Y'all got any questions on this?
Gary, it's not on this, but I want to know, as a Christian, how can I pray for Ukraine? How do I pray for Putin? How do I do this week? How do you pray for the situation?
Oh, those are good questions. You know, personally, I pray for peace. And since I don't know all the workings, I read different things. Nowadays, I have gotten so cynical about news. I don't always know what's going on because having been in 2 wars, I knew of things that were going on that wouldn't make the news until a day or 2 later, that I was there, but what's being told somehow got a little skewed. I don't know if it was just what we call the fog of war, which is, there's so much happening going on and everything, communication, everything else, that it got messed up, or if it was intentionally done that way. So
Probably some of both.
I think for me personally, I pray for peace. War, it gets glorified in movies, but there's times, hours and hours that go by where nothing. Ron and I were talking yesterday about something I forgot reading, binge watching stuff. We would work 7 days a week, 12-hour days, and sometimes there was nothing going on. Nothing, for hours and hours and hours and hours. Nothing to do, nothing going on, hours. And we would have videos and all, would binge watch MASH or whatever. And then you would have 30 minutes, an hour or so of terror. It's not good. War is such a terrible thing. I pray for peace. I pray for the people there. I pray they get civilians out of there. It's not easy to pray for a person like Putin if what's going on and he is targeting targeting areas that should not be targeted. You should not target hospitals or churches unless they become a lawful target where there's, if we had a war here, they're not supposed to target our church. But if we're storing munitions here, it becomes a lawful target. One side saying, well, they started storing stuff there. The other side saying, we're not storing anything there. I just say pray for peace and God's will be done. That's scary. There's probably other thoughts.
How did you pray for that guy you was talking about this morning?
You know, at those times, it's one of those, Lord, be with us. Lord, I hate war. Lord, please bring peace to this land. It's usually always included in all of my prayers. And Lord, you know this guy, you know his heart, you know his family. Comfort them. I mean, I can't pray a guy into heaven.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there's one other aspect I didn't bring up this morning, and that is this. These bad guys would maybe capture a guy's daughter and hold her ransom. And they say, you got to take this mortar and put it out there along the road. Because a lot of times we're targeting the known guys. This guy, to get his daughter back, he's got to go put a mortar or shoot a mortar. If they fire a mortar into our camp, we're watching our camp from way above, and you see that go off, you see the mortar. And Adam, correct me on any of this if you know more information, but when it gets fired, we're firing back at where it came from. So, because we can see the signature there, where it came from. So you get this farmer who's got his daughter now kidnapped, going out there to fire a mortar, he's probably going to wind up dead. Or the same way with putting an IED, they would do things to these people to get them to do something. So this guy might have been an innocent guy who was trying to save his family. I didn't know. Because after we do that, then we release the body back to them, civil affairs, they can get it on base, and they try to identify who it is and get it back to his family. So
There are some pretty powerful words of Jesus in the garden. Lord, not my will, but thine be done.
that's true.
Sometimes it's hard to understand still.
Anything else? Thanks for your attention. Thanks for being here. And we'll continue next week. If any of you will come back.